I really felt culturally misled. He said, you want to know more about Islam? Read the books from the Muslims. I told her, I think I'll be a Muslim. And she said, and she looked at me and she said, I think we have to do the dishes in the machine. If the Quran really is the manual for life and you leave the manual, in the end, your puzzle won't be solid. Well, my name is Joram van Klaveren. I was born in Amsterdam, 1979, in a pretty regular household. Father, mother, I have an older brother, a younger brother, a sister, a cat. And we were living in Amsterdam as let's sort of say a practicing Protestant family, and that was kind of odd, of course, when you looked at the context of Amsterdam in the 80s. Was extremely liberal. It still is, but we weren't. So that's where I come from. Yeah, well, in the 80s in Amsterdam, there weren't too many Muslims in the area where I lived, so I didn't know too much about Islam. The only thing is I was kind of a nerdy guy when it came to reading. So I read a lot of books, especially on my own tradition, Christianity. But the church I'm from, that's the Reformed Church in the Netherlands, was in a historical sense very anti-Islam, because the church was founded by Martin Luther. And later on you got Calvin and Zwingli. Those are, so to say, the big names in the Protestant tradition. And all these persons were very anti-Islam. And of course it had to do with the context of the Ottoman Empire ages ago. But they legitimized their position from their theology. So they said, well, they are different, they are our enemy because they are Muslims, because they have a false prophet, because etc., etc. So that shapes you, of course, especially when you're young. And one of the fathers of one of my best friends was he was a minister in church, and I went with him a lot, and he was very anti-Islam. So that influenced me again. So I was pretty anti-Islam, but it's not that I hated Muslims or whatever, because you're just a teenager and you liked football and whatever. But that's how I was raised in a theological way. And then of course I went to university. And the first day, remarkably, was September 11, 2001. And I started comparative religion, but I was kind of biased, of course, when it came to Islam. And then I saw these attacks on the World Trade Center, and I thought, oh, the things I thought were correct, because now I see all these crazy people doing crazy stuff. And 2 years later, there was a famous filmmaker in the Netherlands. His name was Theo van Gogh. And he was murdered in the streets in Amsterdam, not too far away from my old house. And he was murdered by a guy who called himself a jihadi. So I said, oh, okay, now jihad has come to the Netherlands, apparently. And then you had these terror attacks in London and Beslan and all the other places. And so I thought to myself, I have to do something to protect the country against this evil ideology called Islam, as I called Islam back then. And then I thought, what's the most effective way to do something is go into politics. So that's what I did. I went into politics and I looked for the most anti-Islamic party, and I found the Freedom Party. And then in the end I became a policy maker, then I became a member of parliament, and then I tried in a political way to fight Islam, trying to ban the Quran, shut down Islamic schools, ban all mosques, stuff like that. In the end I got into a fight. Not a physical one, but with the party leader, Geert Wilders, because he asked the people during a rally, do you want more or do you want less Moroccan people in the Netherlands? And everybody starts shouting less, less, less. But a lot of people don't know that there were also people with a migrant background working for the Freedom Party. They were also Moroccan, Turkish, and some of them, they felt kind of strange because he was asking for the removal, so to say, of all Moroccan people in this case. And I thought, that's kind of crazy, because I'm very anti-Islam, but it's not that I'm anti-Moroccan. Why not? Because there are Moroccan people fighting our cause with us. So they're our friends. We're fighting the same fight. And then he said, no, I mean less Moroccans, and that's literally what I mean. So less Moroccans. He was not talking about Islam. And I said, well, we are an anti-Islam party, not an anti-Moroccan party. So I said, you have to change it a little bit, but he didn't. And then I said, well, I'll leave. He said, well, you won't. I did. And then I was still in parliament for 3 years. And it sounds kind of crazy, but I had a long-held desire, and I was writing an anti-Islam book. And I wanted to write an anti-Islam book because I wanted to explain in a more academic way why because I really was convinced of the fact that Islam was a danger. Why do I think it's a danger? And I wanted to explain it to the people, not in just one-liners, as you see in politics too often, but really in an academic way. But I did it because I was a practicing Christian from a Christian perspective. So I made a comparison between Christianity and Islam on several topics. For example, the concept of God. But then some doubts I had as a youngster, when I was like 16, 17, you first starting to be, so to say, aware of what your religion is and where you are, etc. And then I was looking at the concept of the Trinity, and it bothered me because I couldn't get my head around it. So I thought, okay, well, I'm probably too stupid to really understand. But now, while I was writing this anti-Islam book, of course I was in my late 30s. I'm not a boy of 16 years old. So I thought to myself, I'm writing this book, I have to explain it. But I couldn't. And then, of course, I knew about Islam because I studied comparative religion. But I never looked at Islam in a way that I saw it as an alternative for the truth. I looked at it as an object of study. Just like I looked at liberalism or socialism, and Islam was one of the ideologies, I thought. So, but now, when I was looking at this God concept, and I thought, well, Tawheed, one God, and I started rereading the Bible, and of course you start in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is the same book the Jews have. And they were talking about this one God, one God. I looked at Musa, Moses, I looked at Abraham, and all these people, Noah, they were all talking about one God. And I thought, that's kind of crazy, because we believe with one God, with the Son of God, the Holy Spirit, there's this triune God, so to say. And then I thought to myself, well, let's look at the New Testament, because I'm not Jewish. They have another religion, so why do we believe what we believe? Why does the church teach the Trinity? And then I looked just at the things Jesus himself said, because in the New Testament you have passages that people say Jesus said, but you also have, like, so to say, quotes. And then I looked at the quotes, and then there's one passage in one of the books where this guy comes to Jesus, Isa, alayhi salam, and they ask him, how do I gain paradise? And he answers them, there are just two rules, two things you have to do, but it's very difficult. One, treat your neighbor as you want to be treated yourself. And then he repeats the Shema, that's, so to say, the Shahada of the Jews. And he says, hear, O Israel, your God is one. There's just one God. And I thought, that's strange. Now Jesus talks about this one God. He separates himself from God. So he apparently is not God or the Son of God, because he doesn't say it. And then that was for me like a switch. And I thought, okay, maybe these Muslim guys have some truth in their concept of Tawheed. Maybe that is true. So that's how it started. And of course I wasn't a Muslim back then, and I was very almost delighted by the fact that I still have this distance in the person of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, because I thought, okay, they have their prophet, and that's someone we do not as Christians accept as a prophet. For me it wasn't just one moment. It took a while. Like I said, in the beginning, I researched the concept of the creator, so to say. But in the end, that's where I stopped. It was about Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, because he claimed to be the last prophet. He claimed to have this message from God after Jesus, alayhi salam. So I thought to myself, who is this man? So I have to do my research. And I thought I knew some stories, and of course I knew them, but when I researched it, I came across so much information that was at odds with the things I thought I knew. So I decided to write to authorities on the subject of Islam. And one of the people I wrote to was Abdul Hakim Murad, a sheikh, a Cambridge professor. And well, I thought he would never answer me, but it took a while. But 6 weeks later, he answered me very extensively. And he said, well, I know where you're coming from, but the things you're asking are wrong questions, or the question you asked, there is some, there's bias in your question. So he said, well, what you have to do is read all these books and articles that I sent you, ask this person, this man, this lady, read this book, read that. And that's what I did, and there were a lot of books. And in the end, it really reset almost my view on Islam, because when I was studying, most of the books that we read in college were written by non-Muslims about Islam. And it's not that they're all negative books, but it's just not the real deal, so to say. It's not from practicing Muslims. So, and some books we read were from way back. So that's, of course, there's the context, there's the historical situation back then. And these are all aspects that are relevant to understand why these people said the things they said and wrote the things they wrote. But now I was reading books from Muslims, because Abdul Hakim Murad told me, if you want to know more about the Christian religion, you read books from the Christians. You're not going to read a book from an atheist if you want to know Christianity. He said, you want to know more about Islam, read the books from the Muslims. So that's what I did. And in the end, I read a lot of books on Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And then in these books, I saw him for the first time as a husband. And I saw him as a neighbor and a head of state and as a judge and all these different, and I thought, well, the things he said and the things he did, they were so just and they were good. And I didn't want him to do good things, because the image I had in my mind was like 180 degrees opposite. But that was what I found. And so I saw his character, I saw who he was. And in the end, I thought, yeah, I have to have some arguments to say he's not a prophet. So I started asking myself, why do I think, for example, Musa is a prophet? What are my criteria? So I made some criteria. I wrote a book about it. It's called Apostate. So in this book, I have these criteria. I said, okay, I think one is a prophet if such and such and such, and so and so and so. And in the end, I applied it to the Prophet of Islam. So I was looking, and then, yeah, it fits. So I had no real arguments to say he is not a prophet. And I was reading more and more. In the end, it sounds kind of crazy, but I fell in love with the message of Islam. So in my head, I said, well, I think there is one God, and I think Muhammad is his messenger. But of course, I knew if I say that out loud, that's Shahada, and that makes me a Muslim if I say it and I mean it. So I didn't, but I was thinking it. So I said, oh, that's kind of crazy. And what I did in the end, I took all my books, because I still didn't want to be a Muslim. I put all my books aside, and I put them on the highest shelf, and I shared this story. So in the end, I put all my books on the highest shelf, but there were too many books, so it broke. There were a lot of books fell off, and one of the books that fell off was the Quran. So I picked it up, but it was like this. So I picked it up, and my thumb was on an ayat of Surah 22, ayat 46, and it says, it was of course a translation, it says, it's not the eyes that are blind, but the hearts. And that really was my problem, because I thought, I have written down what I have written down. That's what I found out. This was my research. Nobody forced me to write this book. Nobody said to me, you have to write this or that. This is what I found out. But I still didn't want to be a Muslim. So I thought, it's not a rational problem. It's not a problem of the mind. It's a problem of the heart. Because apparently there is something that makes me not want to be part of Islam. So, and then I did like a little dua. Of course, it wasn't a dua yet. But I said, Lord, I don't care if it's Christianity or Islam. I want to know if Islam really is the path for me. I want to have like a sign or whatever. And of course, I hoped for an angel or whatever, but there didn't come any angels. But I went to bed, and when I woke up, and it was for the first time I felt so very secure. I've never felt more secure in my life when I woke up. And then I told my wife, I think I'll be a Muslim. And the next day I took Shahada, and ever since I'm a very happy Muslim, alhamdulillah. Well, but the whole project, it took years. It's not that it was just studying. But in the end, it was not only the mind, it was also the heart. And it was as if the book was talking to me, because it said it's not the eyes that are blind, it's the heart. Because I used my brain, I used my intellect, my ratio, but still there was this missing link. It sounds kind of crazy, but I felt misled in a way, and misled, and I'm in a way that it goes about the culture and almost the whole civilization, because in the West Islam is really seen historically, and there are a lot of reasons, and I understand why, but it's not true. So I really felt culturally misled, so to say, because we don't have the image of Islam that we should have. We don't have the correct information, and perhaps it's part of the responsibility of the Muslims as well, because if you do your dawah work in a good way, the whole world should know about Islam in the correct way. But historically, the West, of course, was like an enemy. So it was hard, of course, to spread the message. Yeah, when I look back, I felt like it was like a paradigm shift for me. Really, it was really as if I got into another reality, and as if someone took the veil away from my eyes, and I could see, this is what people meant. That's how I feel. I reflect on how it was. The challenges. Yeah, I think it's very personal. It depends a little bit on how old you are, male, female, where do you live in an Islamic context or not, are you in school, do you work, are you married? So the challenges, it's like every human has their challenges, of course, and it goes for Muslims, of course. And I think if you want to practice your religion in the correct way, of course there are different responsibilities, different rights, etc. in different stages of your life. So for me, it sounds crazy, but I'm still very happy to be Muslim. So if I am able to pray, I'm very happy to pray. It's like almost like a gift, okay? And I missed out, so to say. I feel like I missed out. So if you can do the things you do as a Muslim, the correct food, the correct way of talk, the correct way of thinking, the correct way of dressing, the correct way of praying, etc., etc. It feels like it completes your life. So all the things I missed out back then, I'm very happy that I can do it right now. So I don't really feel any challenges. Of course, I know about the big context that a lot of people are anti-Islam, etc. And sometimes Muslims feel discriminated, and it's true, and there's a lot of Islamophobia. But in the end, I think, well, Islam is the truth with a capital T. We as a Muslim community we shouldn't be like a victim. We are the followers of Prophet Muhammad. He wasn't a victim, he was a superhero. So we can be proud of someone like that. We should look at the history, all these things that have been done by so many great and courageous men and women from the Islamic tradition. So yeah, I know the context, and I know, and unfortunately I'm a big part of the whole Islamophobia industry that exists today. But the challenges I feel are nothing compared to the pride I feel when I look at Islam. Yeah, well, the family differed a little bit. Some people were very sad because, of course, I came from a practicing Protestant tradition, and my mother, for example, was very sad for the fact that I became Muslim. And it wasn't so much that I became Muslim. She said, "You're not a Christian anymore. That's what counts." Yeah, of course, I understand it from a Christian perspective, but yeah, I don't think it's correct, of course. My wife, and she was very funny and very sober, because I told her, "I think I'll be a Muslim," and she said, and she looked at me and she said, "I think we have to do the dishes in a machine." And I looked at her, I said, "I think I'll be a Muslim." And she said, "Yeah, I think we have to put the dishes in the machine." And I thought, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" And she said, "Yeah, I understand." And then she asked, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" I said, "No," because what do the dishes have to do with being Muslim? And she said, "Well, if you really are convinced of Islam, and that's in your heart and in your head, and you stay the same man for me and for the children, and you stay sweet, etc., then and it's not a problem for you to be married to a Christian woman, then there is no problem. Then life goes on, and if life goes on, we have to put the dishes in the machine." So that was the first reaction. It was
very logical.
Yeah, very logical. Yeah, so it was very good. But of course, that not everybody reacted like that. Especially my old colleagues were very, very anti, very angry. I got many death threats from people. Even people spitting on me in the street, ridiculous. Yeah, so it differed. Some friends I lost because they don't want to be friends with you anymore. But yeah, well, apparently they weren't real friends. Otherwise, they would have stayed. So it was kind of difficult, but at the same time, it was a little bit what goes around comes around, of course, because I was the guy who was saying all these stuff, all the prejudice and all the things I said before. That's they said to me now, and of course it was yeah, a logical thing for them to do, but it was yeah, for me it was I couldn't get angry about it because yeah, they are just reflecting the things I said and the things I did. So it was, yeah, really what I said was goes around comes around, and that's the deal I had to take. For me, it was really as if heart and mind connected, because when I was a Christian, I always felt like there was something missing. And for example, I just talked about Trinity, but the Trinity is a very complex, almost philosophical concept, and I don't think it's correct, of course, and I think many people, if they really study the concept, but I didn't understand it. So, and I wanted to be a Christian, and I wanted to understand it, but I couldn't. So, what I wanted in my heart was not the same as what was in my head, because in my head I said, okay, this is not logical, I cannot accept it. And my heart said, you have to accept it. You want to be a Christian, you want to be a good follower of God, so to say. But I couldn't. And when I became Muslim, that disappeared. It was as if someone connected the stuff. So what's in my heart was in my mind, and what was in my mind was in my heart. So I really felt completed in that way. And I know there is this passage in the Quran that said, today I completed your religion. But it really felt for me as an individual, that was what happened to me, because now it was like a puzzle and all the missing pieces were there all of a sudden. So to me, it feels like it completes your life. Well, to those who want to become Muslim, I would say do it. Yeah, it brings really, it will bring peace to your heart and mind, and to your soul, and it will enrich your life. Because a lot of people say, well, Islam is like it's so hard, and we have to do this, and I cannot do that. But in the end, when you look at the Quran, it's like almost like a manual for life. It's just, of course, when I go to IKEA, I don't know if you have IKEA here in the UK. Yeah. I can build my own closet like this without the manual, but most of the time there's all of a sudden there's this missing thing, or I have extra screws or whatever, and in the end the closet will break down and fall. So, but if I use the manual, it will be firm, it will be solid, and it stays there for a very, very, very long time, perhaps even forever. So, and that's how I look at the Quran. It's just a manual for life, and it's not to make your life harder. It's there to make your life easier, and the things you're not allowed to do, they have reasons, because if you do that, they will make your life not easier, it will make your life harder. So the Quran is the manual for life, and that's something I want to tell the people who are thinking about leaving Islam. Reconsider that decision, because it's a big decision. I think the biggest decision of your life. And again, if the Quran really is the manual for life, and you leave the manual, in the end, your closet won't be solid, not here and not in the hereafter. So I hope they stay.